Hey guys, Loman02. I wanted to share this deck and a series of games with it. This is 5CDreams, so it's a combo deck, aggro combo deck. So I've done something a little different here for the deck tech. I've actually organized the deck by function as opposed to mana cost, and we'll look at the mana curve momentarily after we've assessed kind of how the deck functions. So this is an extensively landed deck, or it's a mana-intensive deck. We're running 28 mana sources. This first column, starting with Badlands here and going all the way down to the fourth Dark Ritual, is all mana. It's essentially all of the best busted mana. You'll note there are no strip mines. There are no Mishra's Factories because our way of winning with this deck is extremely focused on the engine of it. So, this first pile here, which I'll cover very quickly, is the utility/removal pile. These are the only cards that can be dead weight cards. Now, Lightning Bolt is rarely a dead weight card. But Mana Drain and Red Elemental Blast are. They're protective elements for the deck, and/or enabling elements if you're trying to get free mana off of Mana Drain to cast, numerous spells in one turn, whether it be a Howling Mine or just supporting a Brain Geyser or, the colorless mana requirement for Wheel of Fortune and Time Twister. The rest of them, though, can be situationally dead, so there's an extremely low amount of cards that are situational in nature, and these are pretty much it. These are the 6 cards that we have allowed ourselves to have in the deck to help control if we need to smooth out our draw and get more draw steps, as well as support our primary plan. The next pile here are the primary enablers, but not engine of the deck, which include 4 Winds of Change and Time Twister and Wheel of Fortune. So the engine of the deck, the next pile here of 12 cards, is Howling Mine, Underworld Dreams, and Black Vice. Really, the engine card is Howling Mine. It's the card that I think allows this deck to function as well as it does. And it's actually an enabling card or an engine card in a lot of decks, to include Stasis, to include Winter Orb decks. That all kind of function off of a similar combo that's enabled by Howling Mine, which I think is probably the most dangerous card in this whole deck. So the way Winds of Change, Time Twister, and Wheel of Fortune work is, Winds is pretty easy. If you have a Howling Mine in play and you get up to 8-9 cards and you just can't do anything with them, you Winds of Change it away because we are running a lot of mana sources. Winds of Change allows us to do that, so we can get pretty consistent mana draws, and then, if we can get a Howling Mine down, Winds of Change away 5 to 6 cards, or maybe even 7 or 8 or 9 cards, and turn them into something relevant. But the ideal play is that you get an Underworld Dreams down either turn 1 through Dark Ritual or very soon, and then get a Howling Mine online or a Black Vice online to supplement it and kill your opponent very rapidly. Winds of Change also obviously combos well as Time Twister and Wheel of Fortune with Underworld Dreams, essentially doing upwards of somewhere between 5 and 6 or 7 damage, but a significant amount. As you go to this next pile here of 5, this is our draw engines of the deck to include basically 3 power blue cards. I'll call Brain Geyser a power blue card because it's restricted in this format. And then Sylvan Library, which is really just a misprinted green card that, against control matchups will allow you to outdraw them. And if they're, getting your Underworld Dreams or whatever, you can just eventually draw through their counter magic and trick their hand. The last pile here is kind of another utility pile, but it tends to get back restricted pieces or combo pieces to include Regrowth, Demonic Tutor, and then Recall. As you can see, we play a lot of lands. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards with Howling Mines in this deck, so Recall actually goes up a lot in my estimate in this style of build. The sideboard is set up to enable this deck to stay alive against the aggro shops decks, as I think that is a bad matchup for it. It also has Gloom to make Disenchant cost 5 or Dust to Dust cost 6. 2 Abysses against some of the creature-based decks, obviously not the artifact-based ones. 2 Red Elemental Blasts against the blue-based counter magic, style decks, the Drago style decks in the format like the deck. Hercule's Recall to also support the Shatters against the aggro shops list. And then some Blue Elemental Blasts, which are not bad against opposing Red Elemental Blast or Artifact Blast, etc. That they may bring in. Just a general utility card, although I think I could probably go down to maybe 3 of these and maybe find another option for the sideboard. So, deck's very straightforward. It plays very linearly. It's extremely focused. So, the way you win with this deck, I guess you could mill them out with, Brain Geyser, but you really don't have a lot of control elements to keep them from enacting their plan if you don't go for your own plan relatively quickly. So, like I said, very focused, very aggro combo style deck. Probably the probably the best, in my opinion, aggro combo deck in this format. I don't think the best combo deck. I think the best control combo deck is likely Power Monolith, followed up by probably Stasis and or Winter Orb. Like Stasis, Winter Orb, and Power Monolith are all more controlling decks, but they all are also focused on their combo, obviously. So, going to a series of games, playing against a Jeskai, a Dark Jeskai list that I believe is splashing Mind Twist and Dark Ritual. So, his opening hand is spectacular. Let me go ahead and pause it. So, this opening hand I like a lot. It may not look like it goes anywhere, but if this Howling Mine does not get blown up and I draw any land off my top 2 cards, I am either going to be able to cast Ancestral Recall or Underworld Dreams, and or have the availability to cast both. So I feel pretty good about this on the play. Go ahead and get the Howling Mine down, pass it back to my opponent, not knowing what they're playing in the dark. They end up playing a Savannah Lions turn 1, which I tend to be fine with. Savannah Lions is going to be too slow, I think. Get Ancestral Recall off, draw another Mox, play out a Black Vice, and get in some Lightning Bolt damage here. They get an additional Lions down. Still at 7 cards at this point, though, which is great for me. Go ahead and just start playing out my artifacts here. I do go ahead and cast the Underworld Dreams, and then I go ahead and Wheel of Fortune immediately following it, doming them for 7 down to 8, and putting them down to, I believe, 2 on their next turn. No, 3. They have to tap their City of Brass to make white mana, going down to 2. I go ahead and, this draw is busted, obviously. This deck is extremely fast, if you hadn't noticed. And when it has its draw, like it does here, enabled very much so by Howling Mine, it's able just to, get on the board rapidly and just, turn its cards into a quick win. As you'll note, like they did go for a disenchant on the Underworld Dreams. I actually, it's hard telling. Like it's hard telling for them because I cast a draw 7 in the same sequence. I do think Howling Mine is the most relevant card that I have on the board right now. I do think it's the primary engine of the deck that it just, enables Underworld Dreams to win or Black Vice to win for me. Regardless, I never had to pass it back to him here. They went ahead and conceded it, but if I just cast Winds of Change, I win the game right here. So, game 2. Hand again is great, so it's kind of running back more of the same. I do get lucky and draw into Artifact mana here, which means I can leave up a red Elemental Blast. But I'm going to have a turn 1 Howling Mine, and then, 2 cards off the top of my deck if it doesn't get disenchanted. And if it does, I can always Time Twister because I have, a bunch of Artifact mana, which makes Twister fine on its own. They get their attack in here, and then I believe go ahead and Demonic Tutor. My assumption is they're getting like some way to deal with artifacts. I don't per se know though, so I just go ahead and Dark Ritual, get the Underworld Dreams down, and then Time Twister, doming them again for 7, and getting into a hand that could resolve another Underworld Dreams if it wanted to. But my hope is that they draw into a disenchant, and they're kind of boxed into assuming that I don't have another Underworld Dreams because I want these Howling Mines to stay around. And they kind of play as we expect, and disenchant the Underworld Dreams, hoping that we cannot functionally kill them with the remaining cards we have in hand. But we can. We're in a pretty good spot to do this. And we draw into a Dark Ritual plus another Underworld Dreams, which is just a pretty ridiculous draw. Our draw was pretty solid both games, but I would say more ridiculous this game. Like, our draw has just been, like, through the roof great. And, they're down to 2 life here. They Wheel of Fortune as a joke and put themselves to negative 16, I want to say. Is kind of a joke. So, Underworld Dreams, extremely potent deck. It can be, obviously exceptionally unfair. But what makes this deck great? It's very focused. What makes it great and also weak? It's very focused. So in a lot of ways, I equate it to playing like, Modern Burn or Legacy Burn. The decks are great, but there are, some significantly good ways of disrupting them. And if the opponent focuses on what allows the deck to run, I think they can tend to beat it traditionally. What allows it to run is Howling Mine. So, if you're disenchanting if you have an option between disenchanting Howling Mine or Underworld Dreams, as long as Underworld Dreams is not going to kill you on the next turn, I think the Mine is almost always right. I think you get your free card off of it, then you just blow it up. Like, I don't think you let it sit around. and allow this deck to draw, because the deck is so coherently focused. It only has 6 cards that can be situationally dead, and I would say realistically it only has 4 cards that are situationally dead, because Lightning Bolt's never really dead. You can still throw it at their face, and this deck is essentially operating as a burn deck. It's just using Underworld Dreams and a resource that synergizes well with the format, because obviously if Ancestral Recall was printed in Standard and could be played as a 4 of, it would be played in every single deck. And if that were the case, then a card like Underworld Dreams, which would be virtually unplayable, it's unplayable in any format but this format, because of the presence of the power blue and the ubiquitous nature of it in almost every deck out there. Like, decks deliberately splash blue just to play the power blue cards in old school. Underworld Dreams, if it was printed today, would be unplayable. One, its casting requirements are just ridiculous. In a non-dark ritual format, the 3 black is just a lot. And considering this is a 5-color deck, the reliability of getting it out there is kind of amazing. But Dark Ritual does wonders to enable that, and so do Cities of Brass. That said, I think Underworld Dreams is situationally great in this format, but not really a good card. Because of the other good cards in the format, you're able to play this strategy, and it's quite predatory in nature. But I also do think that the real unsung hero of this deck is not the Underworld Dreams or the Black Vice, which just allow you to win. It's the Howling Mine, which allows you to get into relevant cards. So, why I think Howling Mine is the most relevant. So, let's say I'm playing the deck. The deck is a control deck, so its pile of cards that are sitting in this 6 pile here, like Lightning Bolts, Rebs, Manage Reigns, Balances, Counter Spells, Swords of Plowshares, Disenchants, are really, kind of the backbone. They're the situational cards that are the backbone of the deck. And, because you're able to draw so many cards in that deck, you can generally find relevant application for all of them. However, they are situational cards. They're not cards that singularly win you the game. Yeah, sure, if you had 4 Lightning Bolts and you cycled the deck enough with Time Twister and Regrowth, you can kill them with them. But that's not really why they're in there. It's not why STP's in there. It's to enable you to get to the long game and eventually beat them with card advantage. Well, this deck kind of turns that on its head. So, it can, 1, establish a draw engine as early as turn 1, as you saw with Howling Mine. And 2, the cards that it draws are generally always going to be relevant. Even if it's drawing 2 of its 28 mana sources, if it has a Winds of Change, it can turn those into live cards. So the deck is very mutable, and I believe it's going to top deck better because of its coherence than most of the control decks of the format, which is what makes it a good option if you think control is going to be heavy in your metagame. As you start looking at the curve of the deck itself is extremely efficient. So it's basically all mana and all threats, or all pieces to the threat that it assembles, the Tron it assembles, with the exception of the 2 Rebs, the Mana Drain, and the Balance. Those are all just kind of control cards that are in here because of their extremely high power level and or ability to protect what this deck is doing from opposing counter magic if you cannot get into it early. That all said, I think that's why Howling Mine is the unsung hero of this deck, or these style of decks. Because of its focus, the 2 cards it draws will generally be, not generally, they will be more alive than whatever, a deck like the deck draws. Even if, the deck draws, 2 Disenchants in a row, which is pretty good against this deck, typically speaking, I'll almost always draw 2 relevant cards. How often will they draw 2 Disenchants in a row? Not very often. Oftentimes, because they're also a very landed deck, they're going to draw some mana source and then random X, and it may be a Swords to Plowshares, which does absolutely nothing against this deck because between its board and its main deck, it has absolutely 0 creatures. I mean, the most relevant thing they can probably do with some of their cards, STP or the Abyss, for instance, STP, just cast it on your own Mishra's Factory because you'll gain some life off it and get a card out of your hand. I mean, that may be more relevant than holding it in hand, in hopes. So that said, I think that's why, decks like D-Deck or more controlling builds can struggle with Dream-style combo decks, especially slicked down versions like this one right here, where it's extremely focused laser point coherence, or as much as possible, I think, on the game plan that it has, albeit narrow. That said, I think you can make this matchup a lot better as long as you understand that the engine does lie in Howling Mine and you target Howling Mine to get rid of it in that matchup or in whatever matchup you may find you're facing this deck. likewise, you want to have 4 disenchants available to you. I think sometimes folks will scrimp on disenchants. I'll tend to scrimp on the end of Swords to Plowshares before I wield disenchants, because I think disenchant is actually, in this format, possibly better removal than Swords to Plowshares. It's at least more versatile removal. I guess I would say it's probably less powerful, but it's more versatile. And then I think you honestly really need to have some number of Dust to Dust in the sideboard. I think 3 is possibly right. 2 to 3 I think is right in the sideboard, because there are certain matches where you just want Dust to Dust if you're playing like the deck. That said, the deck will play 2 to 3 Dust to Dust and 4 disenchants somewhere in the main or sideboard. This deck also has a struggle against aggro shops list. That's why you'll see I have, Hurkyl's Recall, Shatters in the sideboard, because, generally speaking, like a turn 1 Juggernaut followed by a turn 2 like Triskelion is actually faster than this deck. It's faster. Like, despite being able to kill by turn 4 with this deck in those 2 games, and given like the second draw, I think was exceedingly lucky. I think the first draw was fine. I think it was like a good draw, but I think when you play this style of deck, if you get the draw engine online, your draws will tend to be good after that, because the cards kind of all do the same thing, or they're very focused on doing the same thing. So they'll tend to enable it, especially if you get the most relevant piece, which I see as being Howling Mine. We also have 2 Abyss in the sideboard, some Glooms, and some other flexible options against control decks out there, or anything that could possibly hose it. But exceedingly fast, exceedingly focused, and it's tough to get around for a deck like the deck or control decks. The best thing I can say is, hey, present a relevant clock on them, and sideboard into artifact and enchantment answers. And I think once you get Dust for Dust going, you ideally want to try to save disenchants for the Underworld Dreams, and then try to utilize your artifact removal on the relevant artifacts, whether it be ramp, like a ramp spell plus a Howling Mine, or a Howling Mine plus a Black Vice. I think you'll be well served by it, and eventually, if you're utilizing the Dust to Dust, you'll get rid of most of the draw engines in the deck, and it'll just cease to function because you can Time Twister the deck's back up, and then this deck will just draw dead because it doesn't have its draw engine. So very cool deck. I do think it's very interesting. I don't think it's the most sophisticated to play. I think it's pretty linear, pretty straightforward. I mean, this build I made in maybe 15-20 minutes. I think it's very, very focused. I don't think it was a challenging build, because I think a lot of the cards are just necessary to play if you want to get this thing to work. And work it does, as we saw. So pretty cool. Next deck I'm going to show you guys is Disco Troll. I call it Disco Rain. This is a Disco Troll deck. Disco for Nevin Jarl's Disc. This plays a pretty standard Grixis theme removal set. So the Terror is in there because I was playing against a lot of creature decks. Same with City in a Bottle, and then it plays blue or splashes blue just for the Ancestral Time Walk and Time Twister. Does not play a recall. Has 12 ways to destroy lands in the main deck, and then kind of follow that game plan up with Nevin Jarl's Disc to mop up early resolved artifact mana, as well as playing synergistic threats with the Nevin Jarl's Disc to include Rook Egg, which turns into a 4/4 end step after getting blown up by Nevin Jarl's Disc, and Sedge Troll, which is a 3/3 regenerator that can generally life opponents pretty quickly. In the sideboard, Guardian Beast against disenchant-style decks to protect the Nevin Jarl's Disc. Some Blue Elemental Blasts against red-based decks, maybe Artifact removal, maybe Artifact Blast, because this deck does kind of focus on Nevin Jarl's Disc quite a bit. Gloom, just to stop white-based decks, whether they're white attack decks or decks that are going to be casting disenchants and Dust to Dust. One additional Terror against the creature decks. Blood Moon should probably come out. Additional Shatter, and then City in a Bottle. I could see with this list playing some number of Energy Flux, actually, because I think it probably would have a tougher matchup against like the Aggro Shops list. But this deck also is kind of designed, it's a variant of Disco Troll that's designed to beat up on the deck because of its ability to attack mana resources and then eventually clean up after limiting their volume of blue mana. Clean up their blue mana, or their artifact rocks with Nevin Jarl's Disc. So, fine hand here. Obviously not as fast a deck as the last one we were playing, but you'll see it's quite attritional. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. This is actually a different game, so apologies. Let me jump back. That was actually a game we played in between where I was playing the deck. The second game in this one, unfortunately, he conceded early because I dropped connection and got back on. He had conceded by that point. But this game, here you go. This is Disco Troll. So strip mine turn 1, play on a swamp and say, hey man, like if you want to strip mine me, I'm actually happy with that. He does not wisely. He actually develops his mana situation. I go ahead and start sinkholing his lands. And there you go. Just drawn into sinkholes all day. Go ahead and Demonic Tutor, burn 1 to find Nevin Jarl's Disc here because I'm going after my game plan, which is to allow him to, run his lands into my removal. And then Nevin Jarl's Disc away his other permanents. Go ahead and continue sinkholing. I have basically, land destruction for days in my hand. My opponent appears to have quite a bit of artifact mana, and unfortunately they have the Abyss, which means until I can find another Nevin Jarl's Disc, I'm going to kind of be in a pickle as to what I'm able to do, because this deck does win through combat damage. Well, in a minimum, Ancestral Recall was a very powerful draw there, and I've been sacking the City of Brass just to, eventually hopefully hit it. They go ahead and balance here. I actually discard my Threat and my City in a Bottle and just keep the 2 Strip Mines and the 2 basic lands. The Strip Mines are actually kind of nice here because they ensure that the Fel War Stones do nothing. Go ahead and play another Strip Mine out here and blow up their Tundra. It could be that I was a little too slap happy with the Strip Mines here and maybe want to save them for later. But I don't know. I don't think that's actually per se true. I think I want to just limit them on mana, and eventually I'll draw into a disc and be able to get it out there. I do play out the Black Lotus because at this point they do have black mana from their Fel War Stone and would be able to cast a Mind Twist to hit it out of my hand, and I prefer to have my mana on board. Opponent starts gaining a pretty large volume of life. They are able to get a card off of the Sylvan Library here, but I do have the Stone Rain to go ahead and get that as well. So, very slow attritional game, kind of made possible by the Abyss because I'm not able to get a threat down and kind of clock them. And I kind of play hell trying to find a Nevin Jarl's Disc here. There are 3 in the deck, but unfortunately they are not popping up. Hit another Stone Rain here, just go ahead and blow up the City of Brass and say go. The cool thing about this strategy is if they, find a regrowth and try to positionally Time Twister again, like they're going to have lower mana resources on the board. And that's not even necessarily true. Like right now, we're close to parity on mana resources. I think this is a ballsy attack. I'm not sure I'm a fan of it, but I guess you have to go for it at some point in time. If I have Lightning Bolt, or Shatter, he just loses that Mishra's Factory, which would be a pretty bad way against the land destruction deck to lose a land. And there you go. There's a Shatter. Opponent, I think, unfortunately misses their attack step this turn with Mishra's Factory. I don't think it would have mattered that much. No, actually, they do make it this turn. So this next turn, I go up to 7 cards. I don't have a land to play, but I have 2 answers for Mishra's Factories. They play out a Jaymeday Tome. I go ahead and draw here, and I intend on shattering the Jaymeday Tome. I go ahead and shatter it on end step. If they want to counter it, that's great. They actually don't, though. They just go ahead and draw off it, which I think is right. I think you draw off this and just let it happen. Although, I don't know. That may not be true. I mean, I am on an active library here, and I'm not bound to come off of it if I don't have to. So they go ahead and activate their factory. In response to them plussing it up, I go ahead and Lightning Bolt it. Or I go ahead and draw and then Lightning Bolt it. Go ahead and cast a Hymn to Turek. It eats a counterspell here. And then go ahead and pass it back. I don't play the Mountain now because I don't really want to draw right now. I prefer to draw in response to having to cast this Lightning Bolt to kill one of these factories, which I'm more than happy to do. I wait for them to have it tapped in the attack, go ahead and draw off of the library, and bolt this thing down. My opponent does counterspell this, which actually costs them quite dearly. So they burn through their counter magic, and I know at this point they do not have counter magic available on my turn. I Demonic Tuner for a Mind Twist, go ahead and draw after playing my land, and then just Mind Twist their entire hand, leaving up Red Elemental Blast and Lightning Bolt. They go ahead and cast a Disenchant just to, get some value out of the cards they have in their hand. As you can see, like these plows are kind of embarrassing. But now at this point, my opponent has lost their regrowth, which means that they're not going to be able to time twister, recurse time twister, unless I actually cast my own time twister. I do bolt one of the factories, go down to 10, draw and play out my disco. This gets countered. I go ahead and Red Elemental Blast it, which Counterspell was a pretty good draw off the top deck, especially after having gotten 2 of them out of their deck at that point. They go ahead and get me down to 8. Go ahead and draw a Stone Rain here and a Rook Egg. I do go ahead and blow this up now after playing Rook Egg, just get the 4/4 at the end of the turn. And now my opponent is limited to 5 mana permanent, or land permanents. I do go ahead and draw here. I believe I end up casting a Sinkhole on one of their lands. Specifically their City of Brass, and then on their blue-white lands. So they're out of blue mana at this point, and stuck down on one Maze of Ith and then one Mishra's Factory that are kind of the relevant cards that are here. I do go ahead and hymn them again, put them back down to 0 cards. I believe getting another Disenchant and possibly an STP. No, the Abyss, which is uncastable. So I do continue to draw, play out the Sedge Troll and the Rook. Or, I'm sorry, the Sedge Troll and the Sinkhole. And now, despite them being at 46 life from their early draws, they're kind of up against the ropes. I just go ahead and tear this thing to turn it into a 4/4. I don't really need to keep drawing here. Eventually, I will draw into my Time Twister if I need to use that, but my clock is actually faster than that because I have 14 power on the board. With 14 power, they're on a 3-turn clock. Go ahead and shatter their red source so I don't get fireballed out randomly when I have to pass it back to them, because I'm not going to kill them this next time walk turn. It'll be very close, but I will not kill them this turn. They're down to 8, I believe. Yep. And I could play a discount here. I don't opt to do that. My opponent goes for a time walk turn. I just go ahead and reb this. If they want to counter it back, cool. I don't think they're playing lightning bolts, and even if they are, I'm at 4, so I'll be okay. And that is game. The second game we'll go into here. So much more attritional game, but I think also a very valid way to fight against control in this format is to go more of a land destruction disc package route. So no one would ever say that Library of Alexandria plus Ancestral Recall in the opener is bad. This hand's extremely powerful, and we just overwhelm them, I think, with card advantage here. Yeah, we get the 1-for-1 removals out of their hand, but we're drawing an extra card every turn, and we had a 3-for-1 on essentially turn 1 off of a Mox Sapphire. Restricted cards kind of make the game more busted, obviously. I do go ahead and draw here and shatter, just to limit them on mana. Now we're both down to 2 mana, with the exception of their deck probably requiring more than mine to run. I do go ahead and draw here, play out the Ruby and Stone Rain, one of their Tundras. They counterspell in response, but they're down to 2 cards, so we're kind of getting to do exactly what we wanted to do here. We get Mind Twisted, which is kind of a beating, but I just play a threat out here and say, alright, well, go ahead, get all the advantage you want, but I'm presenting you with a threat. Cast Swords to Plowshares on it, or likely in a very short order lose the game. Cast down a disc here just to get it on the board and untapped. They obviously don't block with their factory, despite it being able to get turned into a 3/3 because I have regeneration mana up. And they start trading 2 damage for 3 damage, which is a position that I'm 100% comfortable with. I actually just go ahead and leave up double regeneration here and cast a Fireball for 4. This puts them on a 3-turn clock as opposed to a 5-turn clock as it was before. And they go ahead and pack it in there. So I hope you guys enjoyed these 2 sets of games and these 2 decks that we recently kind of put together and have been piloting. I think they both attack the deck in an interesting way. And actually, this is obviously still in build phase because it's at 62 cards, which is probably 100% wrong. Tear should not be in there. If we do this quick, I'm sure we can probably rebuild this thing fast. I think I like this better sideboard, and I think I like Blood Moon actually out of there. I don't think I need that because I have so many Sinkholes and Stone Rains to begin with. But this is probably how the deck should look. 2 very cool decks. I think the 5CDreams deck is actually very interesting because it's it's playing a card that's actually situationally quite bad as part of its engine, but is situationally bad in most cases, but because of how the format is set up with the power blue cards and the great drawing engines that are available in it, is just, probably one of, if not the best, aggro combo decks in the format, in the form of Dreams. So anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there. I hope you guys enjoyed this relatively short video series on the old school format and two kind of cool decks that I've been tinkering with and kind of piloting to further explore in the format, which is, as you may or may not know, is extremely wide, and the range of viable deck options in the card pool only spanning the first year of this great game we play, is monumental. And I think, honestly, as you come to play this format, you appreciate the depth of strategic foresight that the initial print runs of the game had, and how in a lot of ways is the precipice by which modern decks are designed and built, and even card sets to continue to promulgate the game are designed, and it's very compelling and interesting to kind of see how that all intertwines, and how some of these old strategies, albeit probably not as streamlined or as clean as they are nowadays in constructed formats, existed even at this point in time, and in the sheer range of available and viable strong decks. The balance that is in this format is pretty amazing to me. I mean, yes, I got it. I'm playing Ancestral Recalls and Black Lotuses, and those cards are generally not balanced. But in this format, I don't tend to think that a turn 1 Black Lotus just means you win the game. It doesn't, and nor does it really mean that in Vintage. But I think there's a lot of misconceptions that it does. But if it's a format that interests you, I hope you guys do try it out. If it's not something you've done, it's a deeply involved format that has a lot of really cool interplay between some old cards that have mechanics that frankly you'll come to appreciate as having spawned the rest of this game and in the direction that it's gone. All right, well, enjoy, guys, and take care now.